Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace. We have another creator-owned spotlight today, talking about a campaign that's currently live on Zoop. It's for a series called Great Pacific. I have the creator and writer of the series, Joe Harris, joining me. It's his first time on the show. So, Joe, thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I feel like at this point I've kind of met everybody, had everybody on. You're one of the few that I haven't had the pleasure, so it's great to have you on. I definitely know your work. And I think this might be the first thing that I read from you that I really was like, man, this is a name that I have to pay attention to. This guy's really talented. So for those that aren't familiar with Great Pacific, why don't you give the elevator pitch, let everybody know what this story is about?
Well, Great Pacific ran for 18 issues from Image Comics starting in 2012, 2013. It was a series of sci-fi adventure I did with Martin Morazzo, currently of Ice Cream Man fame and other wonderful comics. And it's basically about this young oil heir. He's basically heir to one of the biggest fortunes in American history. Only he doesn't want to carry on the family business. He wants to do things a little differently. And on the eve of his 21st birthday, he fakes his own death, embezzles a shitload of money from the company that his father left him, and then resurfaces out on the Great Pacific garbage patch where he plants a flag and declares it his own sovereign country.
So if that sounds wild, everybody, it is, and it's a fantastic story. And here's the thing about it's such a great time to bring this story back for anybody who didn't get a chance the first time around or what have you. This idea of pollution and climate change and being more proactive to kind of make a difference in the world is even more relevant than it was when you first launched this back in 2012. Can you talk a little bit about that? And did that play any part in deciding to bring this back in a collected edition as a complete series with Zoop?
Well, I'm afraid it's always going to be relevant. Because it's I think we've passed a point when it comes to plastic in the ocean, plastic all around the world. It's kind of, at this point, I don't want to say a losing battle, but microplastics, things like that are everywhere. So if anything, Great Pacific was prescient. Mm-hmm. I think, and envisioned this reality that was a bit beyond the reality. It kind of hyper-realized the Great Pacific garbage patch, and he imagined it as this fascinating, disgusting landscape in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean. And the whole idea of that was always, if we don't figure out how to clean this up, it's going to get worse. And you're going to get people who, like opportunists, like our protagonist, Chaz, who step into the breach. And I think characters like him, these would-be industrialists, they've only become more visible in our society as well. I think we could all do with a little less Elon Musk in our lives. It was a lot better when he was behind the scenes making rockets go up in the air. So I think Great Pacific is prescient in a number of ways.
Yeah, as I was I hadn't read it since it first came out, and I was reading it, and I was like, yeah, I mean, just in the last year, there's been some scientific discoveries about different species and what have you living on the garbage patch. It's creating its own kind of ecosystem and what have you. And life will find a way, right? Like that famous line from, was it Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park?
Right. Life exists in some pretty hostile environments.
Yeah, exactly. But that doesn't mean that this is a good thing. And yeah, if and everybody, you can Google Great Pacific Garbage, but you can see real images from recently that this thing is kind of grown out of control. But it must have been something you were aware of back in 2012, Joe. What was the impetus that made you want to tell the story originally?
Well, when I first learned that it was in fact a thing, I was horrified and fascinated, like a lot of people. You can't see it from space, but if you go out there in a boat, you can skim water and pick up more plastic, per square inch than you likely will find anywhere else, because it's all trapped by ocean currents called a gyre, so nothing can really escape. It all just sort of goes around and around with planetary force. So when I had first heard about it, a million possibilities for this came to mind. But first and foremost, I knew I wanted to do a survival adventure story set out on this exotic alien landscape, which we refer to as, Earth's last frontier, in a sense. And I had this idea of doing, a classical man versus nature story, only it's subverted because there's nothing natural about this place. It's all made with petroleum products and debris. But, as they say, truth can be stranger than fiction. So in learning all about this, I learned a couple of really basic factoids that you'd find on any sheet. And one of them, that it was, at the time, twice the size of Texas. So for that, then my brain just sort of lit up. I thought Texas, oil and gas industry, that's where my protagonist is going to come out of, and it's going to sort of pierce that energy sector culture a little bit.
Yeah, and I love you've called him protagonist twice. You haven't used the term hero, which, again, the whole idea, the cliche that we're all the heroes of our own story. But there are so many layers to Chess. First of all, he's very young, and that inexperience kind of plays a part in the story at various times. The other thing is he's grown up as a very privileged individual. Sure. So in a way, there's some naivete there, yes, or kind of assumptions. Maybe he's a little too trusting, or he thinks he can get away with things that he's not able to. And he's certainly fighting against the powers that be. But he's also a very intelligent individual. There are so many layers to him, and at various times, I felt this way when I read it the first time. I felt it when I revisited it. I'm not sure if I like him or not. I'm rooting for him, but I'm not sure he's a likable character. So talk a little bit about developing his personality. I imagine that it had to be kind of a balance there to kind of get him right to come across and be kind of the engine of this story.
Well, I mean, we made him charming, so you're off to at least an interesting start there. He's got a charm to him. He's fancies himself a ladies' man. He calls everyone darling. But he is ambitious in the way those industrialists are. And I can think of, Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan and all these people who decided society needed to move forward, and they had what we needed to get there, be it the railroads or building skyscrapers with newly formulated steel instead of iron when you couldn't do that. So Chaz fancies himself one of these people, and it's an incredibly self-important position to take. It's easy to, kind of get high on your own supply, I think, if you're in that position where you have immeasurable wealth. I think he means well, or he thinks he does anyway. But again, as far as these folks go, it's about him, ultimately. He wants to be the ruler of this place. And at first people think he's struck out on this place to clean it up, to rid the earth of this, and then it turns out that's not quite the case. He wants to be more a custodian of it, but he doesn't want it to go anywhere. And I think of him as an anti-hero, but I always say too that there's a lot worse than him out there.
Yeah, that's 100%, and we see when we meet some of them in this story as well, because right, and I love that you established that right off the bat. There's this idea of, like I mentioned earlier, making a change, a positive change, but he is so selfish, he is so self-involved. Mm-hmm. But one of the other things early on that you can't help agree with him, and again, this was I think a little prescient on your part, was this idea that he comes up with when he first talks about going out there and cleaning this up, converting the plastic to water, converting it chemically so it's not as big of a danger. He talks about the idea of they're not going to do it unless there's a profit in it. And he talks about this, if we want to get companies, energy companies to clean up the environment, there's got to be something in it for them. It's a cynical take, but it's sort of realistic as well, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think you got it. Yeah. Cynical, for sure. He just presumes these things, and when you realize he's not wrong, you're like, ah, shit.
Yeah, but it is a very, when you think of it that way, and late stage capitalism and where we are right now, you sort of think, well, if that's the only way that we're going to save our planet, you think we're doing, like,
I don't know. The jury's out. I mean, at this point, it's going to take technology, and where's that going to come from?
And who's going to pay for it? What?
Yeah, it's like kind of. I don't know. I'm terrified, same as everybody else. I don't know where we're going. I know that every summer, every year is hotter than the one before previous. I know that plastic recycling is a joke. Not that it's not a good idea. It's just not implemented well overwhelmingly.
Yep.
At this point, we find microplastic everywhere, including in the Arctic ice. I read two things recently. Once it was found in the human penis.
Yeah.
It's been found in the brain. Newborn babies. That's how ubiquitous this stuff is. It is just part of the Earth's crust.
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, you think, well, but who's going to pay for it? The cost, whatever. But when it comes to the fact that life's no longer going to exist, then what are you going to? Then there is no cost that's too high. That's what I don't get. But that's why I love these kind of stories, because they really engender that type of thinking and start those types of conversations and what have you. And you mentioned Martin Marazzo, who's a superstar, known very much these days for his work on Ice Cream Man. But his work on this series was really interesting as well, because we've got mutated, marine life. There's a lot of action. You mentioned wanting to make it this kind of sci-fi adventure story. So talk a little bit about your collaboration with him and the way that you guys worked back and forth. Was it a really open script? Was it a tight script? Give us some behind the scenes.
Well, I met Martin. I was looking for a collaborator. I had been living with Great Pacific for maybe a year and deciding what it is I wanted to do with this idea, and I realized I wanted to publish this with Image, where I'd not done a creator-owned book before. And I went looking for an artist. All I knew is I wanted somebody that looked this notion I had of European, someone that looked like Mobius, something I would have seen published by humanoids. And I found Martin on DC Comics' old online comics site that used to be a weekly competition, Zuda. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And he had done this strip. I forget the name. It eludes me right now. I think it was called Absolute Magnitude. That might have been the title. And I'm like, wow, this guy looks exactly like I think this world looks. And he just brought so much more with it. And I'm, working with Martin. He's in Buenos Aires. I'm in New York City. It's a lot of WhatsApp. And we get to see one another most years, at least at New York Comic Con. And we formed a friendship over the years. He's become one of my best mates in comics. He and his family are very dear to me. And I think it has been phenomenal to watch him get the attention that he deserves. I think he's a brilliant talent, and I'm just really proud. I think I look at him even over the course of Great Pacific, and I'm just very impressed. So, if only to get that seen by people in one beautiful volume, this venture was worth it to me.
Oh, yeah, 100%. That's what I was going to say next, everybody. If you're a fan of Martin's work and Ice Cream Man and other things he's done, and you haven't seen this, man, you are in for a treat, because it is just the emotionality, the strength of the storytelling, especially the transitions from panel to panel, that a little bit of ambiguity that is in, I talked about it before, that's in Chaz, his inexperience. When things happen, the expression he gets on his face, he wasn't expecting that, but the wheels are turning. Martin just does it to perfection. It's just, the art is just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your earlier question, I would script pretty tightly because he had never been published in the States before, and I wanted But he would always come back with stuff that blew my mind and sort of exceeded my expectations. He would draw each and every little piece of plastic on that terrain. So things loosened up a little bit between us as things went along, and we, got the collaboration under our belt a little bit better. Maybe things were a little less meticulous on my end because I trust him.
Yeah, and as the story went along, that's the other part about this. Like, I feel like there's more to this story, especially the way you ended it. We even got the sort of cliched, the end question mark. During each arc, there's a bit of a time, or between each arc, I should say, there's a bit of a time jump. And it definitely feels like there could be more to the story. I think even possibly could go back and do some interludes, tell some of the missing pieces that happened in those times. It just feels like there's so much more that could be explored. And even talking about doing it in real time, like Chaz would be right around 40 now, maybe not quite, late 30s, to see where he's at, what has he been up to, that kind of thing. So any thoughts? Like, have you kind of blue skied or brainstormed at all coming back?
Well, I can tell you that one of the big stretch goals that's going to be part of this Zoop campaign is going to be new content from Martin and I. And it's just a matter of how many pages we're going to do. But I have a short story in mind, new material, that Martin's psyched to do, and I'm excited to get out there. So it's just a matter, we'll see how the campaign goes, and that'll sort of decide how long it is, how many pages we have, and so on. And after that, I don't know, but it's a concept and a property and a story that is very near and dear to my heart. So it's something that, I'm going to endeavor to keep out there one way or another.
That's good to hear. When you got to 18, did it feel like a good place to stop? Like, were you happy with what was originally put out there? It wasn't a situation where maybe sales didn't quite support it or that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, on a lot of books that come out, particularly at Image, you reach a certain point in the scheduling, or I should say in the release calendar, where you're selling a lot fewer books than you were at the front of the series. Mm-hmm. But I knew we could get. I wanted to do three trades of 6 issues each, mm-hmm. And so I think it was a pretty good time after that, because I think the market wasn't going to support us forever.
Right.
It's just some natural attrition that goes on with this stuff, and I wanted to get out while the getting was good.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to overstay your welcome. So that. Knowing that maybe before the third arc started, or at some point mid-series or what have you, did that sort of inform the way that it played out? You knew how you wanted this to, because again, we're not going to spoil everybody. You really need to pick this up because it's fantastic, and the way that it ends, like I mentioned, does leave it open for more, but it is a very satisfying conclusion. So, when you're plotting it out, overall, did you have that in mind? Okay, this will be kind of a natural stopping point.
I did. If anything, I probably had wanted to do more single-issue stories leading up to the final act. Yeah. I think there are two one-and-dones right between long arcs.
Yep.
I would, I could definitely, in my head, I can come up with 5 to 10 new things I would like to do set in that world. But I'm really happy with the way it ended. It was definitely the ending we had been arcing toward from the beginning. And I like the way it came together. It was we presented a pretty frightening character for Chaz to contend with, as sort of all the walls keep closing in on him after everything he's done.
Yeah, and those one-and-dones that you mentioned are probably 2 of my favorite issues. There's one, we'll just say, Dens of Iniquity. The other one, kind of a spaceman in a way.
Right.
Those 2 really, I think, to speak to what you were just saying, really show the potential that still exists in this world to go back and tell stories about. Maybe you have an issue that doesn't even focus on Chaz. He establishes this. Like you said, he plants his flag and says, "Hey, this is my nation," and invites people in. There's any number. I mean, we could be telling stories about citizens or workers or his cabinet.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
it's kind of like Deadwood in a sense, in that that's the character in a way that displayed New Texas, this nation. The industry there is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. If you come out there, you're like the minor 49ers. Like you're there to make your trade up in the hills digging gold and silver. So it's an interesting culture. You got some salty people there. You also have opportunists, and people who don't want to be found, and they all tend to end up at New Texas.
Yeah, which again, just potential for friction, which is potential for drama, which is great potential for storytelling. Well, I'm going to remind everybody that's whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening on the podcast, as I always do during these Create Your Own, if this sounds like it's right up your alley, you want to join the community and support this awesome card cover, hey, that's great. But we also realize that times are tight, right? Not everybody's going to have the means. Maybe it sounds right up your alley, but you just can't support it right now. You can't afford it or what have you. We totally get it. The other way you can help out Joe and Martin and all of us other fans of Great Pacific that would love to see more of this is just share it on social media. Let your local comic shop know. Let your comic reading friends know. Let your people that love science fiction and adventure stories know. So if they have the means, they know about it, and they can get a chance to go check out the campaign and become part of the community and support it as well. So again, link in the show notes, everybody. Highly encourage you to go check it out, if only to look at Martin's amazing art. But this really is an awesome story, and like Joe said, kind of prescient and no more relevant. No less relevant now than when it originally came out. So definitely just take a few minutes, click on the link in the show notes, and go and check it out. But as we're winding down here, Joe, let me ask you, we've talked a little bit about Chaz and kind of how he's an anti-hero and what have you. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about, I nearly forgot, finding his voice, because he is, such almost a dichotomous character in a way, because he does, like you said, his heart's in the right place, but he does have these sort of vices, sort of a product of his upbringing and what have you. So was it a challenge finding his voice for you? I mean, as far as I know, you didn't grow up with like a silver spoon in your mouth the way Chaz did. So was that a challenge? And do you feel like you got to where you wanted to be with him as a character?
Yeah, I think he ages quite a bit, even though chronologically maybe not that much over the course of the series. The trappings of being, I don't want to self-aggrandize this more than it is. The idea that I hesitate to call him a head of state, but he does serve that role, and he's responsible, and he's under a lot of pressure from a lot of different places. He's being squeezed. So I think he ages pretty fast in this, and I think that's where he finds his voice, honestly. It's both the roller coaster of this experience, where one batshit crazy thing seems to happen after the next, crossed with just how close to the sun he's flying sometimes. He gets mixed up with international war criminals and dictators and other people, other unsavory types that the international community isn't fond of. I think I might have. I don't know if I hit your question there or not.
No. That was perfect. Because I think you're right. That's what comes across. He kind of finds his voice, and he finds his role, and he grows into it. And what I love about it, you use this to really good effect, is the flashback scenes where he's thinking back to things his grandfather was trying to teach him, life lessons that his father was trying to teach him. Again, it goes back to the fact this is a very intelligent guy, and they're life lessons that his father and grandfather were trying to teach him, but maybe it didn't click until he's put in that situation where he goes back. That's what they were talking about, and I think there's a relatability.
Well, he thinks he's hot shit. He thinks he does, and he gets burned. But that's where you discover who you are, because I always imagined that he aspired to be like the Kennedys, who were instilled with, to whom much is given, much is expected. Mm-hmm. And I would like to think he at least believes that's who he is.
But perhaps the most telling line at the end when he says, "Yeah, I'm a horrible winner, or sore winner, or what have you," that might have been the line that summed him up best. That was fantastic.
Sore loser and a sore winner.
Yeah, exactly. I could definitely relate. To that, or at least my younger self can. So, again, link in the show notes, everybody. Go and check it out. It's an amazing series. And as we're winding down here, Joe, any last thoughts for our audience here?
No, I don't think so. Just check out the Zoop page. We've got a lot of amazing incentives on there, including original artwork, sketches from Martin Razzo you can choose to add to your purchase. And again, some interesting stretch goals that I hope we'll meet.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'd love to read more stories.
If, I know that your dollar there's a lot asking for your money these days. I get it. I'm in the same boat more often than not. So, I ask humbly and appreciatively.
Yeah.
For your
and again, everybody, it costs you nothing to go and check it out. The artwork's amazing. The story's great. So yeah, if you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. I've read it. I've got the single issues. I'm still picking this up because I want the hardcover all in one, which will take up less space than the single issues. So, but if people want to follow your work online, Joe, if you have anything else that's coming out or what have you, where's the best place you have a presence online?
On joeharris.net is my site, and then you can find my Instagram at Joe Harris NYC. I'm on there a lot. Joe Harris Ghost on Twitter. I started wanting all the Joe Harrises, but it kind of gets away from you sometimes. The more of us that are born, I have fewer options to keep it all the same handle.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy. I can't really hide anywhere. It's easy to find me.
Great. I'll put links to Joe's Twitter and Instagram and his website in the show notes as well, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding him, you can go there. And again, link to the Zoop campaign in the show notes as well. So, best of luck on the campaign. Just in the interest of full disclosure, everybody, Joe and I are chatting before this goes live. So, sometimes that's not the case, and I can talk about how much it's funded already and what have you. That's not the case this time. We're pre-recording it. But if you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, it means the campaign is live now. This won't be released until the campaign goes live. So definitely go and check it out. I will appreciate it. Zoop will appreciate it. And, of course, Joe will appreciate it as well. And I appreciate you coming on to talk about this, Joe. It's fantastic to chat about it. Again, it's a series that I've loved, and it was great to talk about it in detail.
Thanks, man. I had a great time.
And to all you listeners, we appreciate you joining us, as always, whether you're listening on the audio feed or YouTube. We appreciate the support, as always, and we will talk to you next time.